So, I was on Twitter. First off, why? Why am I doing that? If you're thinking, Spoon, you hate idiots, why do you go to their drug den and then be surprised you're annoyed? I know, I have no excuse. I clicked on an Elon Musk tweet where he said, if they can tax billionaires, they can tax you too. And some blue checkmark schmuck tried dunking on him saying, we've been paying our taxes all the time. You know when Musk says something that's a chess move, and the dumbasses try and be snarky at him with a checkers move, and then the even dumber dumbasses retweeting it are playing X's and O's? It's painful. Speaking of painful, scrolling down I came across someone praising a video of a supposedly censored TED Talk, as if watching it is going to align your chakras and open your third eye, and the forbidden knowledge is going to rain down on you as you become enlightened. No, it got censored because the guy, Nick Hanauer, is an overtly partisan moron who doesn't know what the hell he is talking about. So let's find out why.
It is astounding how significantly one idea can shape a society and its policies. Consider this one. If taxes on the rich go up, job creation will go down. This idea is an article of faith for Republicans and seldom challenged by Democrats, and has indeed shaped much of the economic landscape.
Hey, look, there's the partisan nature right from the damn get-go. And his claim about this idea seldom being challenged by Democrats is a total crock of shit. The reason I know this is because I'm that boring that I've read about the history of America's taxes. I know what you're thinking, wow, Spoon sounds like the life of the party. I know, right? I radiate sex appeal. Anyway, let's do a history lesson. So, age the page, please. There we go. So, at the turn of the 20th century, America entered its progressive era, cranking out 3 progressive presidents, Teddy Roosevelt, William Taft, and Woodrow Wilson. So we're going to focus on the latter 2, Taft and Wilson. If you ever wonder why America pays federal income tax, you can blame Taft for that, because despite being a Republican, he advocated for it, and the proposals weren't exactly met with great enthusiasm. Protesting it puts an undeserved burden on regular Americans. In fact, here is a picture from the Judge magazine in 1909 comically mocking Taft's proposals via his giant fat ass. Next up, we have Professor turned President Woodrow Wilson, the worst one of the 3. So during Wilson's reign, we had the First World War, which made Wilson cream his pants because now he could finally justify exercising a draconian amount of state control over America's powerful industries, as well as oversee the creation of the dreaded Federal Reserve. Just one problem. It turns out socialist control over industries suck, and the US debt spiraled wildly out of control. Under Wilson, the debt went from $1.5 billion in 1916 to a jaw-dropping $24 billion in 1919, a 16-fold increase in just 3 years. Clearly, this would be the issue of the time for the 1920s, and even the progressive Woodrow Wilson acknowledged this problem, saying, there is a point at which in peacetime, high rates of income and profit taxes discourage energy and produce industrial stagnation with consequent unemployment and other evils. Wilson left the White House in 1921 and was succeeded by the conservative Republican Warren G. Harding, a staunch businessman from Ohio. If American voting tallies are anything to go by, America had fucking had enough of the progressive era, as Harding not only won, he won decisively, crushing the Democratic candidate James Cox with not only 60% of the popular vote, but with a 404 to 127 electoral vote domination, the highest margin of victory in U.S. history at the time, promising a return to normalcy after the hardship of the First World War. Sounds like an early version of Trump's slogan now, doesn't it? Harding would serve only 2 years, however, sadly passing away of heart complications and leaving the presidency to his vice president, Calvin Coolidge. Harding did, however, stack his cabinet with highly competent men, one of which was Secretary of the Treasury, Andrew Mellon. Andrew came from a family whose grandparents fled the heavy tax burden of Ulster during the Napoleonic Wars, and his father would end up opening a bank in Pittsburgh, so young Andrew had business acumen in the family, and after a tender-aged Andrew would display his own business thriftiness from an age as young as 9, he and his brother Richard would become the chosen sons to head the family bank as their father Thomas retired early. At the bank, Andrew proved himself to be a highly skilled businessman, banking on businesses that had creative ideas but were low on capital. However, his investments in aluminium paid off and even successfully challenged Standard Oil via Gulf Oil, which ended up inventing offshore drilling and built the first corner service station to provide petrol for cars. This attitude and skill made him an exceptionally wealthy man, standing alongside Ford and Rockefeller as the top 3 wealthiest men in America. So naturally, Andrew was the right man to call when your finances were shot to shit thanks to progressive incompetence, and Andrew, though reluctant at first, accepted the offer and went to work trying to slash taxes. And this is where the cheap slogans of trickle down and tax cuts for the rich comes from. Mellon's original plans and ideas weren't exactly embraced with open arms. He was hounded repeatedly by Democrats and progressives. Even Republicans were somewhat skeptical. Despite the protests of the plebs and other progressives, Andrew's cunning business mind knew what actually worked in the real world, shifting the taxation from lower classes to the upper classes by drastically lowering the taxes on the wealthy for a very simple reason. If the taxes were too high, the rich didn't invest their money in profitable corporate ventures. They'd hide the money in tax-exempt bonds, which pushes the burden of empty government coffers onto the lower and middle classes. If, however, you drastically lower the taxes, the money that the rich previously hid now also becomes taxable income, and so the total amount of tax revenue you generate is much higher, even though the overall tax rate is lower, which relieves the middle class of the burden and thus gives them the disposable income that helped facilitate the birth of the era that's become known as the Roaring Twenties, and Andrew Mellon would go down as one of the finest Secretary of Treasuries in U.S. history. This video may be a bit longer than anticipated.
But sometimes the ideas that we are certain are true are dead wrong. Consider that for thousands of years, humans believed that the Earth was the center of the universe. It's not, and an astronomer who still believed that it was would do some pretty terrible astronomy.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may have just witnessed the world's worst example of a false equivalence, comparing astronomy to taxes, belief versus tangible data. We're less than a minute in as well. Woof.
Likewise, a policymaker who believes that the rich are job creators and therefore should not be taxed will do equally terrible policy. I have started or helped start dozens of companies and initially hired lots of people, but if there was no one around who could afford to buy what we had to sell, all those companies and all those jobs would have evaporated. That's why I can say with confidence that rich people don't create jobs, nor do businesses large or small.
Wait. Let's hear that again.
That's why I can say with confidence that rich people don't create jobs, nor do businesses large or small.
Not 15 seconds ago.
I have started or helped start dozens of companies and initially hired lots of people.
I should by all rights stop the video right here and say this man's a fucking moron. He literally just shot his own argument to shit in less than 30 seconds. What the fuck?
Jobs are a consequence of a circle of life-like feedback loop between customers and businesses. And only consumers can set in motion this virtuous cycle of increasing demand and hiring. In this sense, an ordinary consumer is more of a job creator than a capitalist like me. That's why when business people take credit for creating jobs, it's a little bit like squirrels taking credit for creating evolution. It's actually the other way around. Anyone who's ever run a business knows that hiring more people is a course of last resort for capitalists. It's what we do if and only if rising consumer demand requires it. And in this sense, calling ourselves job creators isn't just inaccurate, it's disingenuous.
I like how he presents this as if he just said something so groundbreaking. How dare the greedy bastard capitalist hire someone to satisfy consumer demand? What an asshole, eh? How is this a bad thing? The employee gets work and experience and the consumer gets a product or service. Why is this bad? Also, this argument is so reductionist it's unbelievable. The consumer alone is not enough to drive job creation. Let's say, for example, I'm a baker, right? And I have the flour and yeast and all to produce, say, 25 bagels for my morning customers. But I have 50 customers. Their demand alone does not suffice in the creation of more bagels. I need to buy more raw materials, and maybe I can't get them from a regular supplier. Maybe I need to buy from someone else that's more expensive. There's a cost to power the oven. Maybe hiring a second pair of hands to help me. Maybe the minimum wage is too high, which is going to drive up the cost of the bagel, which in turn could drive down the demand. Things like this are never discussed. It's kept simple stupid to appeal to more people who happen to be simple and stupid.
That's why our existing policies are so upside down. When the biggest tax exemptions and the lowest tax rates benefit the richest, all in the name of job creation, all that happens is that the rich get richer. Since 1980, the share of income for the top 1% of America...
Notice this chart. Anyone else think this is a tad peculiar? You mean to tell me through the dot-com bubble of the later Clinton years, then the entire Bush administration, Democrat then Republican, there was no difference in their policies or economic landscape. Together they had rising unemployment for almost 14 straight years. Also, the massive recession of 2008 doesn't even exist on this chart. The uptick in unemployment is the same as it had been for the preceding 13 years. That's because this man is lying through his fucking teeth. These are the actual stats. Notice the sharp rise in 2008 and how awful Obama was. By the way, even this graph can be very often misleading. It's lacking a ton of variables, like public versus private sector, full or part-time, or what class of job it is, so just bear that in mind.
Americans has more than tripled, while our effective tax rates have gone down by 50%. If it was true that lower taxes for the rich and more wealth for the wealthy led to job creation, today we would be drowning in jobs. And thank you. And yet, unemployment and underemployment is at record highs.
And this is in 2012, during Obama's first term when he said this, by the way. I wonder why.
Another reason that this idea is so wrong-headed is that there can never be enough super rich people to power a great economy. Somebody like me makes hundreds or thousands of times as much as the median American, but I don't buy hundreds or thousands of times as much stuff. My family owns 3 cars, not 3,000. I buy a few pairs of pants and shirts a year like most American men. Occasionally we go out to eat with friends. I can't buy enough of anything to make up for the fact that millions of unemployed and underemployed Americans can't buy any new cars, any clothes, or enjoy any meals out. Nor can I make up for the falling consumption of the vast majority of middle-class families that are barely squeaking by, buried by spiraling costs and trapped by stagnant or declining wages.
Okay, this is one of his dumbest points. He tries to schmooze the crowd by trying to speak to them as if he is a regular middle-class Joe, as if simple spending is the only way to fuel an economy. The man claims to have started dozens of companies and hired lots of people. What do you need again to do that? Oh yeah, capital, you disingenuous asshole. Someone explain this to me. Why are these people constantly singing the praises of tax cuts for the rich? Because that's what they're doing, saying it benefits them. But none of these fucking wankers will ever say, you know what we should try and do? Reduce the fucking budget of the Fed. No one ever blames the state for the taxes. No. They blame the capitalist, whose production benefits society. The government does nothing. It provides nothing. Everything it does is because it steals from other people.
Here's an incredible fact, that if the typical American family still retained the same share of income that they did...
Okay, now this chart. Notice in contrast to the previous one, unemployment was going up almost continuously for 14 straight years, from 95 to 09. But this one shows the top 1% income falling massively in the first 2 years of a Republican administration. How did you get to that? It was the dot-com bubble bursting, by the way. Median household income is also fraught with inconsistencies and lacking variables. The amount of people in the average household, their age, working hours, etc. Hell, you can even have a married couple, both earn a raise, but suddenly they get divorced. Now you'll have 2 households with a massively reduced income, when in reality, they both get a pay rise. But you don't see that. You don't see the combined household income anymore.
In 1970, they'd earn like $45,000 more a year. Imagine what our economy would be like if that were the case. Significant privileges have come to people like me, capitalists, for being perceived as job creators at the center of the economic universe, and the language and metaphors we use to defend the current economic and social arrangements is telling. It's a small jump from job creator to the creator. This language was not chosen by accident. And it's only honest to admit that when somebody like me calls themselves a job creator, we're not just describing how the economy works, but more particularly, we're making a claim on status and privileges that we deserve. Speaking of special privileges, the extraordinary differential between the 15% tax rate that capitalists pay on carried interest, dividends, and capital gains, and the 35% top marginal rate on work that ordinary Americans pay, it's kind of hard to justify without a touch of deification. We've had it backwards for the last 30 years. Rich people like me don't create jobs. Jobs are a consequence of an ecosystemic feedback loop between customers and businesses. And when the middle class thrives, businesses grow and hire, and owners profit. That's why taxing the rich to pay for investments that benefit all is such a fantastic deal for the middle class and the rich. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's an idea worth spreading. In a capitalist economy, the true job creators are middle-class consumers. And taxing the rich to make investments that make the middle class grow and thrive.
Taxing the rich to pay for investments. What investments? And who's paying for it? With what money? He isn't going to answer this. His entire ethos is the work of leftist fiction. Only a complete idiot who's never read an economics book in their entire life would swallow this garbage.
Is the single shrewdest thing we can do for the middle class, for the poor, and for the rich. Thank you.
Ugh, what a shit show. So let's finish this on a funnier note. For my own amusement, I looked this guy up, so I punched in Nick Hanauer is an idiot. One of the first things that popped up was a Forbes article from almost 10 years ago about this very TED Talk, saying the reason it was censored is because it was shoddy and dumb, saying he was overtly partisan and his data bore no resemblance to objective reality. Not only did the spoiled little rich boy hire a PR firm to promote the talk, who then warned TED curator Chris Anderson if he didn't post the talk, he will accuse them of censoring the talk. The fool tried to defend himself in an email to Business Insider, saying he got a sensational reaction from the crowd, but the author of the Forbes article mic drops the bastard instantly, saying, maybe so, but I can tell you, having been to a few TEDs, those people will clap at almost anything. Bravo, Bruce Upton. That's some good smackdown right there. And that's all for today. Until next time.